2024 Board of Douglas County Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. We did not have a work session earlier today at 4, so we're just beginning now. If you need paper copies of the agenda, they're available by the front door. And of course, the entire packet is available online. First, we'll have our consent agenda tonight, followed by general public comment. And we'll welcome general public comment for addressing issues that are not on today's agenda, but otherwise related to county business. Given our limited time and the need to have an orderly and efficient meeting, we will apply some rules to our public comment. We do our best to enforce these rules consistently and without regard to the point of view expressed by the speaker. And those are: 1, each speaker will be limited to a total of 3 minutes of speaking time. However, we always accept public comment of any length in writing. 2, individual speakers may not donate unused time to other speakers. 3, all comments must address topics within the jurisdiction of the County Commission. And 4, we reserve the right to mute any speaker whose comments are threatening, aggressively hostile, or belligerent. Please give your name, full name, and address for the meeting minutes and address your comments up to the Commission. Please also know that comments received by the Commission during our meetings do not necessarily represent the views of Douglas County government, but we value the input. We usually don't respond to general public comments on the spot, but if you'll leave your contact information with staff, we'll try and get specific questions answered. So after that, we'll move to our regular agenda. And for each item, we'll hear from staff or an applicant, followed by questions from the Commission, and then open that up for public comment also relevant to that item. Once public comment is closed, we'll bring the item back to the Commission for further discussion and a vote. Lastly, a recording of this meeting will be available on the county's YouTube page and website. So starting off tonight's meeting, we have a consent agenda with 4 items. I'll first turn to commissioners. Are there any items on our consent agenda you would like to pull for further comment? Is there anyone here in person who would like to pull an item from the consent agenda? Is there anyone online hand raised? All right, with that, I would accept a motion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda items 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So now comes to general public comment. Do we have anyone here who would like to address? You can come on up and give us your name and give us 3 minutes.
Okay, sorry. I'm Lori Shuck. I live in the southwest corner of Douglas County, have for my entire life, multi-generational, and I'm here to just put a couple cents in as you're thinking about the issue coming up with the windmills. This was my night, but I think that you probably have a lot of respect for our planning commissioners. You were appointed, half of them, and half by the city of Lawrence. They put so much diligence into that ad hoc committee. I know they worked on it tremendously. I'm hoping that you'll consider keeping the recommendations for 2,500 feet. In the article in the 25th of January in the Lawrence Journal World, Alan Anderson claims it's a ban. It's not. I've got a map of every signed contract and the surrounding area around it. We have multiple people that sign contracts, 37 total compared to 1,400 that don't want it. They can go together and there's still plenty of room. One gentleman owns 4 miles by 1 mile stretch along the Douglas-Osage County line on the Douglas side. He could have quite a few. We know we can't ban them. We know we won't get a moratorium. We've become reality. All we can ask for is something we can live with. We were there first. It's the duty of this company coming in to prove that we can live with it because they're changing the rules, not us. So also, he says the 2,500 feet is terrible. 21 to 4,000 foot is ice throw and fire zone for which remnants of the blades have been found. And that's why we think 2,500 might give us a fighting chance. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. If anyone else here for general public comment? Come on up.
My name is Casey McLennan. I live at 3841 Hillsong Circle in Lawrence. My concern is about the short-term rental policy where they're changing from the taxation classification from residential to commercial, which the article was in the paper a day ago, I think. I also met with Brad Eldridge, the county appraiser. My concern is a short-term rental property owner in the community. that we've moved very fast as a community from, I believe, a closed door session on November 30th without any public input or discussion, to my knowledge, followed up with a January date of when it was started. A letter came to me 3 days ago, I think, and my peers, I've spoken to many of my peers that own these properties or types of properties, and it is financially, it's crippling to see what's going to happen to these things. And the issue is that the state has conflicting statutes, to my knowledge, and there's 105 counties in the state. We're the only one, to my knowledge, that's going to try to apply the commercial tax classification to these properties. So my request is that we pump the brakes on this a little bit and not necessarily let our county appraiser or whomever in the county at whatever level rule on constitutional policy, which is certainly something I think the state should probably weigh in on some level, a judge or somebody at the higher levels. So right now, the way I understand it is Friday, they're going to drop out the letters, which valuations come out Friday, and we've got 25 days to appeal the short-term use of the properties. And there's a lot of different versions of short-term rental, from folks that rent out small parts of their property and live in them, or people that send their properties out for a couple of weeks a year, or people that have these properties available pretty much full time. So the burdens drop back onto the property owner to contest the situation, which I think is pretty unfair, in my opinion, on how it feels. And so I think we should definitely, if you've got any ability, to pump the brakes on this thing and look at this at a little higher level, because a property tax that goes from, say, $5,000 a year to $12,000 a year, that's going to shut down a lot of these. And these properties bring a lot of value, in my opinion, to the community. They service differently than hotels. They do different, there's people that utilize them in different ways. And I think that it adds a lot of spice to the community. I think it's good for the community. So that's what I wanted to weigh in on today. And I would appreciate if this could be at least talked about and addressed at some of the higher levels as to what the next steps might be. So that's what I had for this today. I guess my time's up.
Casey, do you mind signing in there and get your contact information? And Lori, I have yours, but we can also, you're already in. Okay, just checking. Thank you. Do we have others here who would like to give general public comment? Do we have anyone online? Okay, anyone online should raise their hand if they would like to participate. Okay, seeing none, we'll close general public comment, and thank you both for being here, and we'll move to our regular agenda. So the first item is from Public Works to consider approval of a 2024 vegetation management plan. Looks like perhaps Chad Voigt is going to kick us off.
Good evening, Commissioners. We're here to talk about the vegetation management plan that Public Works has put together 2 years ago now. If you recall, this was our first version of this 2 years ago, and you adopted that. At the time, we were looking at addressing some concerns that we had from the community about herbicide use and mowing and different things, and this was a good way to put everything under one document that, one positive thing is it kind of puts out there what we do. It explains our operations, and it's a real easy reference now for folks, either internally or outside. So it's been very helpful, and what we made a promise 2 years ago that we would do a biennial review, and that's where we are today. So after the last 2 years of kind of not hearing a lot in terms of this, I feel like it's really doing a good job of, guiding us and addressing concerns. We haven't had anybody, raise the kind of concerns that they were raising prior to this. So I was actually hopeful that I could come in and give you numbers about reduction of herbicide use. The problem is there are so many variables that go into that I'm not really willing to make that calculation and statement. My sense is that we're about 20 to 30% less herbicide use in our operations. That doesn't apply to our sales to landowners. They seem to be a little higher. A lot of it's driven by weather. Last year, for some reason, was a huge year for Sericea. So we had a lot of sales last year to private landowners. But on our side, we've used less herbicide. Now, we focused last year on mowing more areas, and we did more mowing, and so it may be that some of that reduction is offset by the fact that we were busy doing other things. That's why I don't feel comfortable quite saying, well, it was 16% less or whatever, so. But I do know, I get a sense that we're using less herbicide and we're being more careful about it, and we're giving our employees very specific guidance, and that's a good thing. So we've gone into the plan, reviewed it with the crew, and tweaked a couple of things, very small things. And the suggestion that I'm making is that we move from a 2-year review to a 4-year review. It just seems to fit better with, how this is working. And so we made that change. 2 of the items on consent tonight were to purchase herbicides and then our information that we submit to the state. We wanted to bundle all that tonight so that you had kind of one topic to look at, and then we will, be back again next year to buy more herbicide and those things. But if not, if you approve it the way that it is, we won't be back for 4 years to look at this. I did reach out. I sent some messages to the folks that had commented several years ago about some things to let them know that this was on. They felt like there wasn't a lot of time, notification about this discussion. But on the other hand, they also didn't have concerns in mind that they wanted to raise. What I did say was, hey, if concerns are coming up, it's easy to come back and talk about this. And certainly the fact that we're saying we're not coming back for 4 years for this document doesn't necessarily need to happen if there's an issue that needs to be addressed. So at any time, we could come back and talk about an issue if we need to. One of those could be Lone Star Lake and the use of aquatic herbicide. And we will, our state fisheries biologist is encouraging us to do a treatment. Our landowners are mixed. We have some for and some against. I'm not excited to go put aquatic herbicide in the lake, and I'd like to have that be a pretty open discussion if we decide to do that. We're going to do another survey this summer of what's out there, and if it looks like we have a problem that most people want to address, then we'll probably have to come back with that. That would be a separate issue. So with that, we've got our updated plan here, and if you pass this, we're looking for the 3 signatures and adoption later, and that's the item.
So this, you feel, gives us the flexibility to come back. I know the Lone Star Lake conversation is still an open conversation and probably needs to have a public meeting, which I'd be glad to be a part of. But you feel like passing this plan for a few years, we can still dig back into any of those pieces as needed. That'd be right?
That's right. We knew that Lone Star is going to continue to be an issue that can't just be written in a plan and move forward. And so this plan actually says that any action that we take will be before you to have that discussion and actually give us direction.
We have a little bit more, but I'm going to take public comment first.
Great.
Is anyone here in person who'd like to give public comment on this item? Anyone online? I do think we can count that sort of as a win, but thank you. Come back up. My only kind of hesitation is to go from a 2-year review to a 4-year review when we're kind of just diving into an open space plan. And I think that those things might dovetail together in terms of what we learn and applying some of those values and what might be, in the future for vegetation management in some of our public spaces. That's, I know what other commissioners are thinking. That's my only kind of hesitation.
I'd like to hear from Chad, maybe why you're recommending 4-year instead. You said it seems like the right thing. Can you just give us a little more detail on that?
Yeah, just felt like the 2 years went by in a blink of an eye, and we're back here talking about it, and we have not had issues, and we really haven't had time to, say that, oh, there's an issue in this plan that's not working. 2 years didn't give us that length of time and experience to say that there's something that needs to be updated in the plan. So it felt like more like a longer period would make sense. I'm certainly happy to come back in a year or two, whatever you feel is appropriate. And we could, keep it at 2 and then consider going to that 4 or 5 or whatever later. And the open space may, as you said, raise some issues. So either way, that would work just fine.
I appreciate that question. It seems like by Chad talking about if any concerns come up, whether that's citizen concerns or staff in the practice of this plan raise concerns that need to be addressed. That seems like the same logic applies to if through, whether it's commissioners with our knowledge of the vegetation management plan or staff and committee members working on the open space plan, if they flag anything that feels contradictory or that we need to articulate further, that can come to us as an independent issue. There's nothing that seems to be prohibitive for it coming back in front of us if there is a specific topic to zero in on. That said, it may be worthwhile to consider this along with other policy documents we would like for to be a part of the consideration with as the open space plan progresses for both staff and excuse me, the committee to review and compare with, whatever it is that we might implement in terms of policy or particular projects. So I feel comfortable with the 4 years, knowing that sort of anything could prompt Chad and Public Works to come back to us with a more focused conversation.
Commissioners, maybe just another thing to think about is we'll have 2 new commissioners here very soon. Maybe we do one more 2-year cycle that aligns with that open space plan development. We get those new commissioners on and then look at that 4-year cycle. And I think it'd be good to get some public maybe a little longer public feedback on would 4 years be reasonable? Well, reasonable isn't really the question, but how do they feel? What's the feedback on a 4-year cycle? Or maybe some members of the public, we used to have no plan here. And we got some feedback from the public that it'd be nice to have a plan. We had a spike in involvement. And now it sounds like we have a little bit of a falling back in involvement. And so it might be good just to have 2 years as we bring those new commissioners on and with the hope to move to a 4-year plan going forward after that. That's maybe my suggestion. It's not maybe my suggestion, it is my suggestion.
I fully appreciate that it's a living plan and we can bring you back anytime to issues that come up. I also don't mind having us be poked again to put this in front of us. It's on our agenda. And again, with I think the 2 additional commissioners, that is a good point too. So that's probably my comfort level also.
Totally happy with that.
Enough to make a motion?
Yep. Did the motion have language about 4-year?
Not, it is not.
Would you like me to specify that, or does
I think,
our
yeah, your
discussion?
motion could be to adopt the plan with the change to biennial review period, 2-year review period.
Thank you. As Commissioner Reed, I move to approve the 2024 Public Works Department Vegetation Management Plan with an amendment to a 2-year review, which will come back in front of us February 2026.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Brings us to our second item, which is from the admin, and it's support for the Midco Broadband Acceleration Grant.
Jake Broadbent's going to cover this item for us.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jake Broadbent, Management Analyst. Tonight, I have a grant match request from Midco in the amount of $20,000. The Broadband Acceleration Grant 4.0 application period is open right now until March 11th, with $10 million available this year instead of 5. And Midco is requesting a $20,000 match for their project that will serve parts of Kanwaka Township in rural Eudora. This project will serve 277 passings and with a total cost of $1.7 million. The broadband grant match procedure is linked in your AIR. It states a maximum match amount of 1%. The $20,000 would be about 1.2, 1.1%, so a little bit over. But it does state that you have the discretion to deviate from that. I have Andrew Curley on Zoom and Jeff Stromberg here in person. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. And would either of you care to address as the applicant?
Yeah, this is Andrew Curley. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Andrew Curley. I'm the Senior Director of Government Relations with Midco. And they did a great job giving an overview of the project. So I just want to add, we were appreciative of the partnership during the last grant round that the Kansas Office of Broadband put out, and we were successful in our project in Lecompton Township. And that was Midco's first opportunity to receive a grant from the state of Kansas. And we do think it's a large part due to our partnership with Douglas County. They put a big emphasis on local support and local partnerships. To the fact that now a co-investment partner is a requirement for the program. So we appreciated the partnership last time. We were successful, and we look forward as an opportunity to continue that success to build out to more and more areas of Douglas County. I would stand by for any questions if you had them.
Thank you. In terms of partnerships and support, are you reaching out to other kind of local entities, the Eudora School District? I believe the other one isn't probably entirely within the Lawrence School District.
We have reached out to the Lawrence Chamber of Commerce, as we've been supportive of our projects in the past. We've not reached out to the school district, but that would be it's a great idea. We can definitely do that.
Yeah, I think any additional outreach you can do to local entities, I think would be really fabulous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Commissioners, do you have questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Commissioner Willie. Sort of along those lines, this is Commissioner Reed. Andrew, I'm curious, it was interesting to read that co-investment from a local entity was required. I did not go dig further to read what sort of that regulatory language was, but I'm just curious how specific it is. Does it define local entity? Are you, to Commissioner Willie's question, I know we have a sort of an established program at Douglas County and have had that previous project you mentioned, but I'm curious if you've had a process of reaching out to other governing taxing authorities, or if the local entity is otherwise defined as you understand it.
Yeah, local entity is not specifically defined. We found that the program is oftentimes at the county level. It seems like counties are the ones who have been most apt to invest in broadband projects as a co-investor in this project. But the Kansas Office of Broadband does not necessarily define who the co-investment needs to be from. I think we've just found that most successful in our experience has been partnerships with a county commission. And as you alluded to, knowing that Douglas County has an established program and procedure and that we've been successful in the past is why we were coming to Douglas County again.
Got it. Thank you for that response. I think I would just encourage that, along with Commissioner Willie's suggestion, that outreach to those other taxing authorities that cover the area that you are looking at for a project, I think would be helpful just in terms of community outreach and possible opportunity for other co-investment. I'm thinking specifically about Eudora has an urban growth area and plans for growing their city boundaries, and that may overlap with some of that project area. So I would encourage that you be in conversation with those municipalities, even if what you're working on right now is completely in the unincorporated area. It may not remain in the unincorporated area in 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I mean, over communication is always good anyway, so it's good to make the local authorities aware of the project, and it helps create awareness for broadband expansion, whether they can co-invest or not. So definitely a point well taken.
Commissioner Kelly, any questions? Okay, we're going to open this up for public comment. Is there anyone here in the room who would care to make public comment on this item? Anyone online? All right, we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion or vote.
Happy to make a motion. First of all, I want to thank Commissioner Willie. This was a project of hers to make sure we had a policy for it. It's neat to see it happen this way, so nice and easy, so congratulations. Make a motion to authorize a one-time general fund reserve grant match of $20,000 from Midco contingent on the award of a broadband acceleration grant through the Kansas Office of Broadband Development.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing forth the proposal. This is a real need, and we appreciate companies bringing forward ideas to match that. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for your support.
right, that puts us to our third item, Douglas County Board of Commissioner Chambers remodel. So I believe Jay will be our spokesperson.
Thanks, Commissioners. Jay Zimmershed, our Director of Capital Projects.
Good evening, Commissioner. Jay Zimmershed. Here with us tonight is representatives from Trainer HL Architects, the architects that prepared the drawings for the remodel of this chamber, Joy Coleman and James Bibbins. As you're aware, the project was out to bid and we received bids on February 20th. We received that went out through our bids and tenders website as a true competitive bid, so it was open to all interested bidders. We received 2 bids on the 20th, one from A.B. Bradley and one from B.A. Green. The construction, the selection committee met very quickly thereafter, reviewed the bids and the submitted qualification information, and it was unanimous to look at entering into a contract for construction with B.A. Green Construction. We also have a letter attached to your packet, which is a recommendation from the design team making the same recommendation. We do believe that B.A. Green has submitted the lowest and best bid in terms of their qualifications for doing the work in this room. It is very specialized, and to that end, that's really, I believe, what was the deciding factor for the selection committee. At this time, we are recommending that this board review it, and if acceptable, they move into a construction contract with B.A. Green for the amount identified on the AIR. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Commissioners, any questions?
Jay, on page 3 of the bid tabulation sheet, we get a base bid, and then down below, we have some spots that have no bid. Can you sort of explain when you're looking at unit price 1, unit price 4, how we should look at that?
There was questions in terms of what the contractors were bidding on in that condition. It comes down to the amount of plaster that would be repaired within the rooms, but there are unit costs in place and various other ways to manage that. So really what we shook that bid and had that discussion with the contractor to be sure we understood. It comes down to what they weren't exactly clear on what they were providing, and so they were unable to provide costs. Another one of the items was for integration of some technology, which we, the county, are handling with a separate vendor to the project, direct. And so the way they interpreted that is that they really had no additional work associated with it. So there were 2 under question, Commissioner.
One more question. Can you give us, I think maybe we did expect only 2 bids. Can you give us a little background on, have you discussed with anyone who didn't bid, sort of what's going on here in the market that would cause only 2 bids on this project?
I can't say that we specifically talked to the groups that did not bid. We had 4 contractors active on the project, one that visited the site, I'm guessing 4 to 5 times, and then did not submit a bid. And so we were a little surprised by that, but I have not contacted those groups and asked why they did not bid the project.
And I'd say, Commissioner, we are really struggling to get contractors to bid projects right now. And I don't know if that's things that Trainer HL is seeing in other projects, but it's extremely difficult to get contractors to bid projects right now. And I don't think it's so much materials. I think it's labor and availability of workforce. It's a really tough time to be building. I don't know, Joy, if there's anything you'd want to add to that.
Joy Coleman, Trainer HL. Yeah, it's a hot bidding market, and the construction market is really active right now in the Kansas City area. We have several things going on here in Lawrence. We have, the KU Stadium, the football stadium. So I think the labor pool is stressed.
Maybe a question for Jay. Within these bids, did we get any kind of a time frame, or is that yet to come?
We did get a time frame. I believe it was I'm sorry.
Yes, BA Green submitted 280 calendar days for the construction, so that puts us at March 6th, I believe, if the contract is signed by the 1st of,
So,
sorry,
yeah, that'd be our
December
plan,
6th.
commissioners, is that our last commission meeting for the year, potentially, I'd hope we'll be back in before year's end, will be in this room on March 6th. So after that date, as commissioners know, we're taking off March 13th, right? That's the Wednesday. And so then our next meeting would be, we're going to be meeting out at Public Works in the training room out at Public Works for the remainder of the year.
Any other questions for this crew? Okay, this is a public comment item. Was there anyone in the room who'd like to make public comment on this? Come on up.
Gene Dorsey, Lawrence, Kansas. I just had a question on the bids. There's reference to repair of historic windows, and one of the bidders bid on it. The BA Green did not bid on it, and I was just curious as to how that piece of the project was going to be handled. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who'd like to make public comment on this item? Sarah, is there anyone online? All right, I'll close public comment, bring it back up. I did have as much a comment probably as a question for our team there, and that is, we know that sound quality is such a difficult issue with this room, and it sounds like we have a separate contractor for that, for the AV piece. I just want to make sure that they're working very closely with how the room is designed to manage that sound. Do you want to have any comments about that? It's certainly something I hear from constituents about a lot, how miserable it is to try and, sit in this room and hear what's going on.
Yes, that's a good question. We had, at the beginning of the project, before design really started, we had a acoustician come in and evaluate the room and recommend to us and the AV installer where acoustic treatment would need to be placed. And that is why we have the acoustic panels on the back planned for this north wall and the acoustic plaster on the ceiling to absorb the sounds that are bouncing around. And then the AV, part of that recommendation recommended how to handle, the microphones and the systems that were being installed, then to work with that acoustic treatment. So the AV company that will be installing not the acoustic panels, but the microphones, the speakers, and that system has worked off that plan from the recommendations from the designer.
Do we expect that we'll have a significant betterment of our system here, or do you think that there are just issues with the way the room lays out that will still make it difficult for sound?
I believe the recommendation was that we have too many live surfaces, so when we do create sound by speakers and voices, the sound bounces around and it makes it harder to hear. So that is why the acoustic panels on the back wall will absorb those sounds going back, so you don't get that reverb coming back towards you as you speak, which will make, that is why that is being put there, to make that situation better.
Thank you.
So just to check on Mr. Dorsey's question here, because I think it's very similar to the one I had. The windows are still part of the project, It's just in that base bid, there was some confusion about what we were asking, is what I heard when I asked that question earlier. Is that correct?
Correct, it was included in the base bid
Yes,
information.
included in the base bid, so it's still happening. It's not like that part was taken out.
Commissioners, any other questions or comments?
And that's very common on bids, like, it's very common, contractors just fill things out differently.
I was not surprised, but not thrilled that it came in a little over what we were anticipating or hoping for, but that is also kind of reflective of that tight bid market, I'm sure, tight labor market. So I think it is time to move forward on the project.
Yeah, I agree. I'd like, yeah, I would ask staff to do a little checking with the folks who didn't bid, just to understand and see if there's something in our process that maybe, if there was some confusion about some of the, how we responded to it. I just want to make sure that we're not creating that it was due to that labor market instead of us making interpretations without maybe a little more data to say, like, tell me what's going on. And if we're hearing, yeah, it's the labor market as we think about another project that's a little more expensive. And I knew we'd be doing that a little differently, but it'd just be good to know that as we prepare for future building projects.
Any interest in a motion?
Sure. Make a motion to authorize county administrator and to enter contract for construction with BA Green Construction Company in the amount of $1,449,000 for the Douglas County Board of County Commissioners Chamber remodel project, and approve a total project budget in the amount of $1,543,845 after realization of estimated offsetting project revenues.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Now we have an update from Little Government Relations.
Stuart Little is here to provide the update to the commission.
Good evening. You're getting a real mix of experiences here tonight. I'm happy to be here and give you a look at kind of where we are in the legislative session, talk about some specific issues. Be happy to answer any questions, or if I can't, circle back around to you and get some answers. We have just passed the midpoint of the legislative session. They worked till last Thursday, took about 4 days off, and then they're starting what will now be the next 5 weeks to get to the end of the legislative session. So lots of things have gone away, aren't going to happen anymore. There's still a lot of issues out there to be dealt with, and I'll give you some sense of how we're going to go. I think the most important thing right now is as I'm sure you heard a couple weeks ago, when the House failed to override the governor's veto of the flat tax with other things, we'll just call it the flat tax package. They did not have the votes to override that, and that sets up where we go for the rest of the session, because in some ways, as you hear some of the other things I'll talk about, the one thing that I feel like there is a sense that policymakers want to get done before the session is over is some kind of tax relief. With $3-4 billion in the bank, that they're trying to spend it now through the budget process, but they're also looking at how to put together something that will reduce taxes, obviously looking at income, looking at property tax, those kinds of things that they want to focus on. But it's not going to be a flat tax, and we know that now, so it's going to be a matter of who puts what together. There are lots of different factions trying to figure out how do we put something together that works, that they can get passed, and so that's essentially what we're waiting on. And that's what we'll spend the next 5 weeks doing, is figuring out what kind of tax package can pass. And I say that in part because once you've stalled over this one thing that we know everybody wants to do, are we going to get a lot of action on a whole bunch of other bills, or are just going to be kind of slow and we're going to move through things? It's going to be interesting to see what gets put together, but also what other issues may come up. I'll talk about some of those. The budget for right now is moving through the process. We're about 3 weeks ahead of the regular schedule on budget. They should be done with the big budget bill probably next week, and then start debating that and passing that. And it will be done Most of the budgets are done and they'll be wrapping up. The objective is to get to the 5th of April, which is 5 weeks from Friday, and that's the end of the regular session. And so they want to have some kind of tax package and the budget and maybe some other policy issues in place by then. Part of what we anticipate is normally they get to the end of the regular session and they go home for 3 or 4 weeks and then come back for what's called the veto or the wrap-up session. There is great interest in getting some taxes cut and getting out of town as quickly as possible. All 125 members of the House and Senate are facing elections this fall, and everybody's anxious to get to that. And so that we're not going to want to spend a whole lot of time, and we're going to move quickly. So that'll be interesting. I do note, after this round of elections, we'll have some shifts in our, particularly this composition of representation in the Senate, how some of the districts moved around. But that is kind of where we're at this point. I want to talk about a few of the bills that are making their way through the process. There are not a lot of bills out there that are being worked on, and I'll emphasize here a little bit a couple of issues that are still alive. There's lots of things that came and went and are dead, but we're still looking at a couple of bills. I'll emphasize one. There's one that's it's Senate Bill 346 that's going to attempt to change the zoning process that is used. In part, it will be, among the things that it does, it attempts, it's kind of a confusing bill. It's kind of unclear the way it's drafted, and so there's lots of questions, but it's still alive, and they intend to work it in the committee. Number one, it would allow only changes in zoning by landowner request, and then it would also have some parameters put about describing zoning as upzoning or downzoning, which is not a statutory term. The bill says you can't upzone or downzone, but nobody knows what that means. And so there is interest in having some consideration for how they may want to make some changes in zoning, but that's one that's going to be a pretty technical conversation, as one would imagine. A couple of other things. There was Senate Bill 273, which is a bill that removes, there's always this conversation in the unincorporated parts of counties around the state where the city has authority outside of their boundaries for 3 miles out there. And that is, there's a bill that has been blessed, so it's still alive for the second half of the session. That's probably going to get some attention as well. There's any number of interests where folks don't want to be in that city range. There is a right-of-way bill that was just introduced by the telecom and video industry. It's House Bill 2806. It has a hearing tomorrow. It is, as it's been described, it's limiting the fees that can be charged for service providers in the right-of-way. It is my understanding in the way the bill has been presented that there are some counties, not us, that are charging some of the video and internet providers a different one they believe to be exorbitant. They're interested in having all of that evened out to where there's everybody's paying essentially the same rate. So that's how it's described. How a bill comes in and how it goes out can be very different. So there's no telling what may emerge out of that process. A couple of other things I'll hit very quickly. We're back again this year with the bill that prohibits local jurisdictions from making any decisions with regard to plastics, bags, containers, those kinds of things. It has passed the Senate before. It's up for debate on the Senate. It's come out of committee. It's going to be debated on the Senate floor. It will go to the House, and that's something that'll continue to go. There's another bill. We're continuing to tinker with the revenue neutral rate and the process you all have to do to put your budget together. There's a bill that will be worked in the Senate, and if you create new TIFs or IRBs, you cannot exceed your revenue neutral rate for the next years. They don't want people finessing around there and having some different ways they may try to come up with it. It will be worked as well. One more to note, Senate Bill 2704 has to do with, described in the bill as no impact home-based business. And that means it's very broad and general. It means any kind of of manufacturing, sales, distribution, service. So it's just broad, it's everything essentially. And what it essentially says is local jurisdictions could have limited regulation over those kinds of entities as necessary. You could then have this no impact business on your property. You could have employees working there. You can't obstruct traffic, but you could have, so there's issues with this in terms of how it would be implemented. You can't charge any additional fees. You have no additional regulation, no rezoning. You can't force people to put sprinklers in if they're running a business. It has those kinds of things built into it. So it has obviously interest in some areas. Last couple things I will mention here to wrap up. The issue of the unhoused and providing some state assistance in what's going on was manifested in a bill or a proposal from the governor to have $40 million that she put in her budget for local grants that would be matched one-to-one, and they would be for infrastructure and setting up how to manage and address the unhoused. And then it wasn't meant to be sustainable funding. It's meant to help get things set up. It is, as everything happens in the budget, the House Budget Committee has removed the $40 million. The Senate Budget Committee has the $40 million in. So we're going to debate what we want to do and how that would fit into the context of everything else as they finish up the budget. So that's something that's going to linger on for a few weeks. There is a bill that attempts to do the same thing that has a hearing next week. It has a bit more regulatory oversight put into whatever a local unit would attempt to add to the system, or that they may want to add to, not just money and you guys go fix something. We're going to have some regulatory oversight over it. But that'll be heard next Tuesday. There are a couple of public health bills I needed to note. Just this is kind of a legacy of what we've dealt with for the last 3 or 4 years. There is a bill, Senate Bill 391, that's on the Senate floor. It likely will be worked. It's one that, like the bill passed last year, it essentially continues to restrict local public health authority with disease outbreaks. It further enhances the ability to only make recommendations, not to quarantine or have isolation, and it does pass some authority down to you all as county commissioners to manage some of those issues. So that's coming. A couple things that probably aren't going to happen, and I'll just kind of note here at the end. There's a bill that we've talked about before, the government competition bill, that if there are services that are provided by a governmental entity and another organization, a privately owned organization, would want a tax break to not have to pay property taxes or something for not being in a competitive environment. That was narrowed down last year into a bill that said only going forward, and it limited to childcare it wasn't gymnasiums, it was childcare fitness center. And there's one other one that just escapes me right now. It'll pop back into my head in a second. But it limited it down to those kind of things and within a 5-mile radius of where that governmental entity. That bill may come back up this year. It may be something that is snuck into a tax, because we're going to have one more tax package. And it may be something that there'll be an attempt to fit in there, because the tax package is going to be very appealing for everybody who has to face reelection. It's going to have increase in the homestead exemption. It's going to have reductions in income tax rates. It's going to have kind of fixing the Social Security tax issue. So it's going to have, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that gets added into what eventually comes out. A couple of things I would note. We have not yet had a hearing or any real discussion of Medicaid expansion. The House Health Committee has agreed to hold a hearing sometime before the end of the legislative session. That is meaningless for the most part. It's not going to be something that will generate a lot of any results, but it will be a hearing. Other note, that there's been some conversation about the potential for medical cannabis still is percolating around the State House. There are folks having conversations about what that might look like. There are supposed to be some bills coming out in the next few days, and I think of Medicaid expansion and these two issues are the kinds of issues that if we're going to be in a hurry and be gone by the 5th of April, probably not going to have. But if we can't fix tax and we start staying week after week trying to fix things, kind of everything gets reborn at that point. So last but not least, there was a lot of conversation about addressing tier 3 capers and making changes to that would either eliminate it and move everyone back to tier 2, because the tier 3 package is not necessarily as competitive as 2 and those kind of things. So there are employment issues. I apologize if that was a little long. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Stuart. Do we have any questions? I think you've left us a lot to look through and read through.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, this is actually a public comment item, even though we are not taking any action on it tonight. Is there anyone in the room who would like to have public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none. Anyone? Okay. With that, we are closed and we bring it back, and we have no further other than to receive that report. That puts us down to appointments. I believe we have some in the works. I'm not sure that I'm prepared for any at the moment.
Nope, nothing from me.
Okay, we have a few coming up to work on then. And then Commissioner or Administrator Miscellaneous. And Sarah, would you lead off with your memo?
Thanks, Commissioners. My updated memo is in the packet. Some additional information attached this week. As we discussed last week, included in the memo is a conversation that Commissioner Willie and I had with public health staff related to potential, and I want to make sure I'm reading it right. For some reason, my Adobe's moving weird. Potential health impacts of public health impacts related to industrial scale wind and solar energy. So really kind of excited about this partnership. We've had a lot of conversations with public health around health and all policies. So this was an example of them doing some research on some information, and that's included in your packet. You might find that valuable. Let me know if there's additional information you'd like on that or explanation. Also, Jill is fresh off of working with the Corporation for Supportive Housing and more than 45 staff in community housing and housing-related services that are participating in a 2-day training. So really excited about that work, and I think that you'll hear more to come on that over the next couple months as we prepare for, see the outcome of this and see what's coming next in terms of our budget. Want to make sure that you see that, our IT Director, Starla Jones, was recommended to serve on the State Supreme Court Office of Judicial Administration IT Security Committee, which I'm really excited about us having some engagement in that space with the state and after some of their issues associated with the breach. And just, I do have quite a few kind of, in addition to the Chamber's 2023 EDC annual report is in there, I attached some kind of pieces that came to Commissioner Willie and I as part of the quarterly meeting with the KU Innovation Park related to some of their metrics and outcomes of some different things happening. I thought this is the kind of information that commissioners have been talking about related to economic development. So you might want to take a look at that. And I think that's an area where KUIP is trying to enhance in their outreach. And there's an update from the Food Policy Council attached as well that's got some good information about some things that they're up to. No work session next week, commissioners, and just a reminder that we are off on March 13th. And then after that, we will come back out at our new location. And at this point, I don't have a work session scheduled for that week. I would say as we move into April, some of those dates are still moving around. So please just give us some flexibility on that. That's all I have, commissioners.
I want to say I am greatly appreciative of the Health Department tackling that. I know that was something that we heard from planning commissioners about, taking in information and not having kind of the expertise to necessarily evaluate those public health impacts. And turns out we actually have people who do that in our county. So I really appreciate that fit and their willingness to step into that. So I think there's a lot of good reading here. Commissioners, do you have any other miscellaneous items to cover? All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for being here.